So good morning. As she mentioned, I'm Kandyce Ormes-Ripley. Hey there. I'm starting to see some of you I met yesterday. I currently serve as the Associate Vice President of Data Analysis and Strategy, or I like to say I'm the big nerd at Buckner. And so I also work as an adjunct professor at Baylor University. That's right. So many of you may have heard of Buckner, and if you haven't, you may be familiar with the old children's home off of Buckner Boulevard, the old orphanage. So needless to say, Buckner's been around for almost 150 years. And so we serve children and families and seniors. So we also have some retirement communities. We serve throughout Texas in 6 different countries internationally. So before Buckner, as again Jeanette said, I worked in the for-profit world. I worked in the manufacturing business and was in supply chain management, and I oversaw our capital projects. And if you believe it or not, it was a steel mill, so I had the hard hat, I had the steel-toed boots, and I like to say that my claim to fame was I bought a train. So it was not just any train, it could come off the tracks, turn around. So I feel like that was an exciting adventure for me right out of college. So I say all that to say, even though the world of a steel mill and working for Buckner seem to be so different, I feel like they share this excellence in service and quality, and not only the excellence in those things, but also the challenges that we all know about in project management. So I like to say I've been a part of a lot of different kinds of projects. So you have the really small projects, the really large projects, complicated projects. How many know about the overly complicated projects? The projects that sometimes just look like long to-do lists. And then the projects that actually turn out to be programs, or what you might recognize as program improvement. So today what I want to focus on is how project management can be for the greater good. And so more specifically, I want to look at just different lessons that I've learned in the nonprofit world and how these are really lessons that we can all take, and they can lead us to successful projects no matter the size of them, the scope of them, or whatever landscape of practice that we're working in. Okay, let's jump in, right? So first things first, what makes a good project? Come on, help me out. Right. What else? Yes, what key components have we all been told that have to be in a good project?
Customer satisfied with what you deliver. Doesn't matter if you save money, it doesn't matter if you save time. The customer's not going to receive the project or they don't feel value to their expectations, then you basically wasted the time on the project.
I love that because most people would say you got to have it on time and under budget, right? So that's a great one. Anything else?
Executive support.
Amen. Anything else?
Define scope.
Yes. So here's some things as I was looking through of just goals. We have to have SMART goals, right? We all heard about those. Clearly defined objectives, a solid timeline. We want to make sure that we start on time and we end on time. And if we end early, that's always great. But if we end too late, we're in trouble. So then we have the milestones. So we want to make sure we have all of the critical path. We want to be completed within budget, and even better if we come in under budget. Consistent meetings, we all love those, what we like to call them as huddles. And then, of course, we as project managers want to have control, make sure that we have teamwork. The list goes on and on, right? So that's great. But what makes a project difficult? Anything else? I love it. Everybody's like, okay, let me tell you what the difficult part of it is. Yes.
Lack of clarity.
Yes. Definitely.
Changing scope.
Yes, these are great ones. So I had some things about processes. Everybody has a process, so many processes, and those all feed into your project. I think someone said goals that are not clearly defined, because then you start looking into project creep, right? And then what about keeping the team motivated? That's always a challenge, right? When the conflicts arise in your team, that's hard. My favorite, facilitating healthy discussions. That's really hard as well. And I think actually somebody said this, but I put, what are we missing on here? And I think I heard someone say, people, right? So think about it a little bit. Let that sit in. Why would I say that people can make a project difficult? Somebody laughed. I love it. I mean, we all think, yes, people can make it successful, but gosh, don't they make it difficult? So if we look at this, we think about what makes up a project team, people. What or who makes up our stakeholders? And I think someone said that earlier, that would be people. So you have your customers, your leadership, your clients. You see where we're going here? People, people, people. And then you throw in that you're a nonprofit, so you have donors who sometimes act like your executives, or sometimes they act like your customers. So again, complicated. You also have government agencies telling you what you can and can't do, or how you should spend. You have volunteers that like to tell you how to do things as well. And then, of course, we have our employees and our clients and our executive team. So you get it. The list goes on and on. We're back to people. And so, needless to say, people complicate things. I'm looking at you because you're doing great with the nodding. I love it. And so the more people involved, the more problems occur, right? So how many of you have ever been in a project where you felt more like you were building and flying the plane at the same time? Or how we might say that in project management terms is we're planning and executing the project at the same time, right? Show of hands. Oh, wow, more people than I thought. So if this has been you, was it exhilarating or was it terrifying? Yes, yes. So I recently was voluntold to lead an M&A team. And so I think probably most of you know about an M&A team is a merger and acquisition team. So a little backstory here. Negotiations had been going on for over a year, and I was thrown in and said, lead. And I say thrown in because that's how I felt. I had actually been planning a trip to Africa. I was supposed to leave the next day when I got a phone call to say, hey, don't go. We need you to lead this. So needless to say, I hadn't been involved in any of the initial conversations, nor had I been part of the planning team. But here I was, asked to lead. So I quickly started forming the team and trying to understand the conversations that had taken place, and more so the conversations that had not taken place. So in my first week as project manager, I made up a lot of assumptions. Assumptions of conversations that I figured had already taken place. And yes, I know, assuming is never good, right? So I was quickly reminded of that. And so I began to see red lights flashing everywhere. We entered our first planning meeting, the first one I was leading, and I wasn't really given any instructions except, here's the goal, get to the finish line, and be successful. So I want you to take a look at this clip. We all like a good movie, right? And this is Madagascar by DreamWorks, and see if you can relate to this scenario.
Look like pineapple, my little poop.
Skipper, look. Analysis. It looks like a small incandescent bulb, designed to indicate something out of the ordinary, like a malfunction.
I find it pretty and somewhat hypnotic.
That too, sir. Right. Rico. Manual. We may be out of fuel.
What makes you think that?
We've lost engine 1. And engine 2 is no longer on fire.
Buckle up, boys. Don't look dull.
This might get hairy.
Attention, this is your captain speaking. I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we'll be landing immediately. Bad news is we're crash landing.
Does that look familiar? Have you been a part of a project and along the way, indications of problems everywhere? Your team members, your boss, or maybe it was even you that said, it's fine, let's just keep going. Basically, we ignore all the flashing lights and the loud screaming of abort, abort. We just keep moving forward. We just keep flying the plane because we have to get to the destination on time. So, lesson learned, as a project leader, plan for those red lights. Have a backup plan. Know what your milestones are and have a plan for when those don't work. If XYZ happens, what's your next move? So again, plan for those flashing lights. So let's go back to my meetings. Needless to say, in my first meeting, I saw many flashing lights, and I quickly realized that my assumptions were definitely off the table. As the team began to meet regularly, I started to pick up on some of the team member dynamics. There were lots of personalities, and I'm talking about the extreme. So I learned that some team members had been working on the project for, again, over a year, and they were completely worn out. Then I had the newer team members. They were newer than me and knew less than I did. So I had assumed that there had been so many conversations from the beginning, and again, lesson learned on my part. So let's look at this clip again.
We may be out of fuel.
What makes you think that?
We've lost engine 1. And engine 2 is no longer on fire.
Buckle up, boys. Don't look dull.
This might get hairy.
Attention, this is your captain speaking. I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we'll be landing immediately. Bad news is we're crash landing. When it comes to air travel, we know you have no choice whatsoever. But thanks again for choosing Air Penguin.
Raise your arms, Maurice. It's more fun when you raise your arms like these. I can fly.
So, how many of these recognize some of your team members? Right? So you have some that are the aloof. Raise your hands, this is so fun. The panicked, the fun, or the serious, right? So frankly, I can watch this clip over and over and think of so many different projects with so many different team members. And they all fit these characters, right? But because the team, and the leaders, in this case the penguins, ignored those flashing red lights, the project seems to be headed to failure, right? The project is crashing and it's completely falling apart. So second lesson learned, know your team members. Know who can handle those challenges. Know the ones that are going to be the unconcerned. Know the ones that are going to be stressed. And know the ones that are going to be the problem solvers. Know that there will be challenges in your project, so go ahead and identify your go-to team members. Remember that backup plan we talked about? Know who those team members are that you go to for that backup plan. So again, let's go back to my merger and acquisition. Not only did I learn that there are different personalities of the team I was leading, but I also needed to be aware of all the other people involved. So all those stakeholders, right? Because you see in a merger and acquisition, there are two sides. So there are two project teams. And in this acquisition, there were actually 5 legal teams. We all worked with those lawyers. It's real fun. So we want to add to, you have your employees, the employees that are transitioning from the other team or the other company, and also remind you that we serve people, so we still have clients to think about. So our biggest objective was to ensure that the employees transitioned easily and that our clients never knew that services had changed. I'm telling you, this project kept getting more complicated. So let's go back again to Madagascar, and let's watch the personalities of these team members. I want you to continue watching and seeing how under pressure, those personalities intensify.
Fly! This could be it, Marty. I just want you to know you are truly a one in a million friend. Thanks, buddy. You're the best ever. I know you won't mind when I tell you. Come on, tell me anything. Tell me what. I broke your iPod. What? It's so small. It made me bad. The horror. I'm sorry. I'm gonna kill you, Buckner. I'm sorry. Get to do it. I love you, Gloria. I always have. It was like you love the beach, or a good book, or the beach.
Don't you love it? Don't you love how under pressure those personalities just get bigger and bigger? So again, know your team, know the active stakeholders, because they become even more important as the project continues to become more challenging. So did you notice that some of the people turned, or the characters, I guess they're not people, became very apologetic? They started confessing all of their sins and all the things that they had done. So as the project's crumbling, so are your team members. So others became disengaged, and then others continued to pretend that everything was fine. So again, intensified personalities gone unchecked create a team that has tension, confusion, and even disruption. I've seen it take place, I've seen it destroy teams, and overall break the project. So again, another lesson learned, plan for this. Know your team and be ready to rally the team together. Practically speaking, be direct and honest. Let your team know when things are tough. Be empathetic. I know this is stressful. I can see that this is challenging, but how do we solve it? How do we get ahead? So create a sense of teamwork, and in spite of the challenges, let the hard times bring the team together and not destroy it. Okay, this is the last clip.
Only 2 passengers on the couch for us, Skipper.
That's a number I can live with. Good landing, boys.
Who says a penguin can't fly?
Hey,
So I could watch this a million times, and frankly, I just love it because they say, oh, only 2? I can live with that, right? And how many times do we really think that? And so I want to say that that's okay. That sometimes, here's the lesson in this, that everything's not going to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be. Identify the items that don't have to be perfect, and be okay with a few misses. Know where their dips and challenges might be, and be able to live with that so that you can still be having a successful project. You didn't know you can learn from Madagascar, right? Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So we've planned for the red lights, we've gotten to know our team, and we've come to realize that even there can be imperfections or bumps around the way. That's easy when we're working with a project. But what happens if the project is actually a program? What about this when people are not widgets and projects, they're people? The idea moves me to the second topic that I want to talk about today, and that's when a project becomes a program. So I showed this picture of what we typically describe a project: a start and a finish, a straight line, a way to get from point A to point B. Completing the project based on a specific timeline. But a program, that actually looks like this squiggly line, right? And if we're honest and we're skilled project managers, that really terrifies us. Just how a project team is complicated, a program involving services to people also has challenges. So again, I want to share a personal example of this. I want to take a program that we have at Buckner called Buckner Family Pathways. This program focuses on single mothers who are working to get a college degree. The program requires that mom have full custody of their children and be fully enrolled in school or vocational program. So with that, Buckner provides a place to live, assistance with childcare, assistance with their education, and meeting some of those other just basic needs. So a few years ago, I was asked to assess the program because we were not meeting our targeted outcomes. You see, our success rate for the moms finishing the program was less than 50%. So my responsibility as the project manager was to, well, figure it out. So I had to find out why the moms weren't being successful. How could Buckner close the gap? Sounds pretty easy, right? How many of you have had projects like that? Figure it out. So that's what I did. I got to work. And really, I honestly thought that this really wouldn't be that hard because all I needed to do was review the participants' files and figure out why they stopped coming to the program. So I looked for the explanations of the participants and why they didn't finish and why they were marked unsuccessful. So as a key problem solver, I just started asking the question, why? Why were they leaving the program? The explanation of the exit of the participant should give me exactly what I need. I'll tell leadership and we'll fix this. What I uncovered was that many of the participants were not completing the program because, well, they were failing class. You see, our program, you have to keep a 2.0 GPA, and they were not hitting that. So I go to leadership, I tell them what's happened, what I found, and they suggest, well, this is easy. We'll hire tutors, we'll create mandatory study hours. We're gonna help these moms graduate. So I agreed, and then I had this pit in my stomach of like, for some reason, I don't feel like this is it. So I started to dig a little deeper, and I started asking more questions. Again, going to the why. So why were they failing? What was it? Was it a particular class? Was it a specific degree? But what I found was that it really wasn't grades at all that were causing them to fail. They weren't going to class. So the next question, why weren't they going to class? Isn't that why they're in the program, to get a college degree? I started considering the challenges. Maybe it was something like transportation, or gosh, maybe they're just bad at time management. So I knew that Buckner could fix any of these things, or at least help support in these areas. But I decided again to dig a little deeper, and I started asking why. So here's what I found. These moms were dealing with past trauma. Many of them were experiencing depression, anxiety, and just mental health challenges. There was so much going on that they couldn't mentally hype themselves up to get to class. So in reality, Buckner didn't need to add support services around tutoring or time management or even transportation. We just needed to support the moms where they were and in coping with their past. So that's what we did. Buckner Family Pathways program now has a counseling component, and we've seen success rates increase drastically. So that straight line project to problem solve and to start looking like, what does this look like, a drunken line sometimes, of starts and stops and twists and turns and sometimes wrong ideas. Well, now this is an effective program that's really meeting the needs of the clients that we're serving. So here's my last lesson learned. You might not get it right the first time, but keep digging. Ask questions. Ask yourself, what went wrong? How can we resolve this? I tell my students all the time that you don't fail if you put your learnings back into it. So put that knowledge back into your program and improve it. That's how you get an effective program. I do have one more clip, but it's not Madagascar. I want to share a client story with you. And so this is a client, LaCheryl, and she was in our program, and I think she just says it best of how going through family pathways.
I was brought up in a single parent household for the majority of my life. So the last thing I wanted was to repeat that because I know how I felt. had an amazing mother, but she was busy. She had her own business, she had kids, and so sometimes you don't get some of those needs met. In 2010, when I got here, I pursued college and I got a job, fresh start. When I found out I was going to be a single parent, my fears were that I wasn't enough to be a great parent or that I didn't have enough to be a parent. I hadn't finished my degree. I didn't have a career. How am I going to be able to make this work? Driving through the neighborhood that I once lived in, it just reminds me that I had to come out of some brokenness. I had to come out of some darker times where I maybe didn't have as much hope. I was just in uncomfortable and unstable situations, living situations, and I will say some mental situations also. I longed for a peaceful situation, and I did long for a more healthy situation. It was so uncomfortable, but I still was like, there's no way out of this right now. Within a 2-year span, I lost my grandmother, I lost my dad, and my mom was and is still sick. I was dealing with depression and everything was gone. And I was just like, this cannot be life for me. My hope was running low. Everything changed for me when I went to a community fair at my college. There was a table set up with a Buckner representative there. And she told me that I was perfect for the program. There was some fear there. I didn't know what I was walking into. And then within 2 weeks, I did a couple of interviews and I was offered a housing spot there. My daughter and I were. It was amazing. I was a long way from being healed, but it boosted my hope again that things could get better, that they were getting better. Before Buckner, I was broken. And I was filled with some hopelessness that I have overcome now.
So I want to tell you, I've met with Cheryl. I've talked with her several times, and her story is incredible. She now owns her own home. She owns her own car. And I believe she's a teacher and wanting to get her master's in teaching. And so the last time I talked to her, she was telling me about her daughter making straight A's. And so those are some of the stories that, for me, it was personal because that was a project I was assigned to. And it was something deeper that if we didn't keep pulling back the onion and looking at it, we wouldn't have gotten to the root cause and the real problem. And so I want to leave you with this. What have I learned? Whether it's in buying a train or helping people, we need to plan for our challenges. We need to know our people. We need to really know them. We need to know their strengths, their weaknesses, and how that contributes to our whole team dynamic. Know that things won't be perfect and be okay with that. That's a hard one for me. And don't give up. Take what you've learned and implement it. Challenges, curve lines, they don't mean you're unsuccessful if you put those lessons learned back into your program or your next project. You'll be stronger. The project or program will be stronger. And more importantly, you're going to make an impact. And so I leave you with, let's go out into the world and let's impact it for the good. I did want to leave it open for questions, if you had any questions.
We have volunteers with microphones. If you raise your hand.
Wow, I'm pretty awesome.
No
Yes.
question?
I don't know, Lee, you had a lot of questions yesterday.
Okay, so is it on? Yeah. So I just wanted to tell you, I've was involved previously with Shoes for Souls that Buckner does, and that's just an awesome program. At our church, we would gather shoes. So, so that story was so moving. I appreciate that clip. I was curious does that program also do the same thing if it's a single dad instead of a single mom?
Yes. So we have about 7 different locations in Texas, and it really depends on the location of whether we can allow dads to come in or not. Mainly because, like in Dallas, it's living on our campus, and we also have a transitional service where kids are aging out of foster care, and it's only girls. And so we just like to make sure that we're doing safeguards. But yes, there are other programs throughout the state where we do have dads, and it's amazing to see those dads step up. Any other questions?
Thank you so much for sharing your lessons learned. I'm just curious, as far as project management and what does your team look like within Buckner? How many colleagues do you have, and what types of roles and responsibilities does Buckner provide for that?
That's a great question, because we do not have a project management team. So you're looking at the project manager. But what I have learned in that is it's really hard. We've talked about it several times if we just had a project management team. The complication there is you need experts who are in the field, who know all the policies and procedures. We're highly regulated, especially with things like foster care, or in our retirement communities, we have a lot of health care, so lots of regulation happening. And so with this specific, like the mergers and acquisition, it's really understanding who's the expert in that area. This one was really complicated, and I ended up breaking it down into smaller projects. So we had the operations team, we had the clinical team, the finance team. So each one of them had a project. And we're actually right now in the stage of bringing it all back together and going through it as a full project. So it's a hard question, but I go back to know your team, know who your experts are, and form your team based on that.
Can y'all hear me? I am on. Okay. I'm so bad with the microphone.
Me too.
I know. I'm like, am I on? And I did that at a wedding once. It was terrible. Okay, sorry. I got way off topic. You talked about taking over a project where you had, brand new colleagues, but then you had colleagues that were really burnt out. Do you have any specific, techniques, or how do you go about the burnt out colleagues? Like, how do you help get them to re-engage?
We have kind of a vent session. And so just allowing them to feel all the feelings. And I think that's what we try to do sometimes, is cover all those up that we're even us as the project manager. And so we don't do it in front of the team, but we let those feelings out. And then as the newer ones, we start engaging them more, and helping them lead out in some areas where we start seeing their strengths. And that's what I've seen to be a bit more helpful and successful. And then we're supposed to be finishing out in the next month or so. And my big push is that we don't start another project. We have some time to kind of take a break, because it's the people who've been in it for about a year are our real team, that we need them, and we don't want to lose them. Great question.
Yes, I have a question. First of all, thank you very much for sharing this story. I started crying, honestly. Thank you. And my question is, you mentioned you don't have a project management team, but you manage projects and programs. How do you educate your team about project management?
They hate me. Very delicately. So if I'm really transparent, so I have an undergraduate in psychology, so I feel like I can talk about social workers. they're really into the feelings. And we do have a team where we have targets, we have outcomes that were defined for us for the program, and we want to be successful. And so we always meet, we have performance meetings, and we talk about, okay, people aside, how are we doing? Where are our gaps? It's really hard for people not to take it personally because they're vested into that program. And so we try really hard to separate that out of it's not about you and the job you're doing, it's about the program, and we need to learn how to improve it. And so COVID really did a lot. We have lost a lot of involvement. People are not at the level where they were, and so we're having to adjust programming to really meet basic needs where we were already going to that empowerment stage of creating sustainability. And so it's a great question because you have to be looking at your program all the time and really asking the questions why, because a lot of times in that social work world, it's not going to be the obvious. It's going to be something that's deeper. And so it's just asking and unfolding. And but yeah, it's definitely a struggle because people don't want it to be a business, but we need it to be successful. It's a great question.
Can I go next? Okay, so I'm hearing root cause analysis.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, being really important.
But don't say it like that.
But you can't use those
say
terms.
It like that.
They don't like those terms. Okay, so I understand then that your merger and acquisition is still going on. The project hasn't been finished yet. You have a date that's coming up or whatever. Yeah, okay. But my real question was, did you ever get to go to Africa?
So I have been to Africa, but no, not on this trip. So I tell them they owe me. But yeah, it was, for me, that was really hard because it was for work and I had a project or a reason for going. And so we were evaluating if we could start some new programs in different parts of Africa. And so it was an interesting mindset shift of I'm leaving tomorrow for Africa for 15 days to no, you're not, you're leading this huge project. And so it was weird because I did the whole psychology thing on myself where I did the grieving and then I came to grips with myself. And then I realized that I could still be impactful. And so we're still looking at the different places in Ethiopia, actually. And so if we continue moving forward there, I've already said I'm going. Anyone else? Yes?
Project management triple constraint. Cost is always one of the items project manager consider. Coming from the corporate world, I would like to understand how would it look like being in the nonprofit? How would you manage those expectations?
So money and budget becomes totally different because now you're dependent on if it's a new project or a new program, you create the project, you get it going, and then you have to hand it over to like our CFO and our chief development officer to go raise funds. So it becomes interesting because we have these internal battles of, is it the chicken or the egg? Do you raise the money first? And he says, no, I need a place in a program to raise money for. And then you have the CFO saying, well, we don't have money, so you have to get the money first. And so it kind of is a give and take internally. And we have some internal policies around, we need a donor to commit at least a certain amount of years so that we can start moving the project forward. But it's definitely a tug of war. It's some fun conversation.
Thank you for sharing your story. We have a big group here. Do you have volunteer opportunities?
Where are you?
Yes.
Oh, hey, I can hear a voice. Yes, we do. So we have a volunteer page where there's all the different programs that you can volunteer doing. We do Christmas with a lot of the kids for foster care, with the moms. And then we have other projects where a lot of businesses We're building houses for families. So families can go through a family hope center where they've moved. It's hard to tell you about the program without telling you all about the program. So they move through what we call family coaching. So they're setting their own goals. And so we want to make sure they're financially stable and empowered and have jobs and all that. But they can qualify for a home. And so you can build a home on your property, like in a parking lot. And we frame it up, and then we put it down and then send it off. And then the community, we do that in the Rio Grande Valley, and they come together and put it back up. So from construction to playing with children, and to shoes. I'm glad that you did the shoes. Yeah, we donate shoes, so it's Shoes for Orphan Souls. I couldn't even remember our own program, but we send shoes to all the different countries and schools in the area.
Hey, Kandyce, back on the topic of nonprofit versus profit, how does that, from a project management, I get the funding challenge. What other challenges from a project management standpoint? For example, motivating your team, is that different? Or knowing whose requirements you're addressing and trying to exceed, those types of things?
Great question. I would say as the project manager, the most important thing to do is to really research it first as you start to lead, because there are different regulations, there are different numerous stakeholders involved. As far as motivating the team, the challenge I go back to is people are really invested. I mean, they're working there because they have a passion. And so when things, that curvy line, the dips and challenges, they take it very personal. And so I really think it's that empathetic ear of asking, what are you seeing as the challenges? How do you see that we close the gap on this? Those would be the hardest things. I think from just a time management point of view, it's really hard too, because you have so many things you're waiting on, like the donations, or you're on other people's timelines a lot on, especially the government is never on time. So you can submit a grant or a proposal and you have a deadline and you better make it. But for them to get back to you could be 3 months, 6 months, a year. So it's always moving. It's a moving target. So that's, for me, really hard to manage when you're also managing other projects that you're trying to timeline out with that. But I think it's the people thing of just really getting to know them. And I heard you talk about knowing your people on your team yesterday, and so it just resonated with me in that area. But I think from a nonprofit, it's usually their heart and soul is in there too. Any other?
I have a question on merger and acquisition.
Oh, there you are.
I just completed a project on merger and acquisition myself, and as the project manager from the company being acquired, your sense of urgency is different from the company that is acquiring. How were you able to juggle both and make sure that the alignment and that transition was a smooth process?
Oh, that's a great question. So we are the one acquiring, and there is the project manager on the other side, and we are doing huddles, just her and I, constantly. And I think that's really important. I would say what's really hard about this one is they don't want to lose this organization. And so we've had lots of just challenges with them saying they can't get something or get it to us on time. And so when you talk about a close time, yes, we do have a close time, but we're getting to crunch time because we're not getting other things. But I think it's just that communication piece, honestly. And motivating your team to get those things done and really showing them why it's important. Because in ours, we go back to the employees and then the clients. And so again, it's not just about how we're feeling, but our clients don't need to feel that there's any animosity or change happening. And that's really hard.
Thank you.
Good luck in your acquisition.
Oh, I completed it.
I'll tell you, that's one of the hardest projects ever.
How did you manage timeline? More specifically, did you have a top right-hand drawer in your desk where you kept a hidden project plan?
How did you know?
So how did you answer the question, when will this be done?
So we have a stop dead date, and that's a legal binding document. And so it's tug and war right now. But I would say going back to your question about nonprofit, one of the things that's really hard is a timeline in general, and making that where people are wanting to stick to that and be involved in it, because it's ever moving. People don't understand, and I know, like, as a project manager, we try to overcomplicate with Gantt charts and spreadsheets. And in this world, people don't care. It is like pulling teeth to get people to just fill out their task list. And so I realized really quickly that I was overworking myself because I was doing all of the things that they weren't doing. And so I started thinking, we don't need like a Gantt chart for a timeline. We just need these critical dates, and we talk about them every day.
Okay.
Oh no.
Yep. I have.
I feel like this is a
comment.
test.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I apologize for giving you kind of a bad time yesterday, because you're a damn good project manager.
Thank you.
I worked for nonprofits for a long time. My CEO used to remind us it's not for profit, but it's also not for loss. So you have to practice the same things that we do a little more delicately, as you can see. But I think you re-emphasized everything our morning keynote said yesterday in regards to people and how you do that.
We didn't plan that either.
Yeah. But my question is really much more important.
Oh no.
Do you have your PMP?
Not with you. Purdue, does that count?
Is this on? Okay. The question, when will it be finished, reminds me.
Stop asking that question.
Bear with me. Reminds me of a movie.
Madagascar.
No. No, it's a serious movie done from a book written by Irving Stone called The Agony and the Ecstasy. And in the movie, Charlton Heston plays a part of David. Rex Harrison plays the part of the Pope. And the scene is painting the Sistine Chapel. And in the middle of the scene, David is lying on his back, painting, splashing paint everywhere, and a blob of paint comes down on the altar of the Sistine Chapel while the Pope is doing Holy Mass. And so the Pope looks up, and he just looks at David and he says, "When will it be finished?" And David rolls over and looks down and says, "When it is done."
That reminds me, my dad's a carpenter, and he says, all we lack is completing it. Any other questions?
I have one. If you were to pop back into your train buying days, so out of the nonprofit, it seems like you have had to figure out how to work differently with people, kind of in the two. Is there anything that you would take back with you to that kind of way of working, specifically to how you would more effectively manage the people side of projects?
I would encourage you to have fun. I think we look at a project, and I know like the to-do list, the timeline, all that becomes so important. And you also said this yesterday, and I was like, what? So in our M&A, we huddled together with the other project manager, and she's very to the book. We talk, we get off the phone. And so it became my new challenge that we were going to laugh before we got off the phone. And so I think it's those little things that just getting to know the personalities of your team. Some are not going to like to do that. But creating this sense of teamwork and camaraderie that you're all working for something and celebrating the wins along the way. I think we skip, yay, we did it. Okay, next thing. And so I would say celebrate those milestones. Anybody else? If not, thank y'all for letting me be here.